Welcome to campus. I'm Alan Shimp, and this is Campus Classic Movies. The Day the Earth Stood Still is a 1951 film, directed by Robert Wise and starring Michael Rennie and Patricia Neal. It's a classic and a landmark of the sci-fi genre. In the film, an alien, Klaatu, comes to Earth with an important message for the world's leaders, but he insists on speaking to them all in person. However, when he lands in Washington, D.C., the U.S. government locks him up, and when he escapes, they begin a manhunt across the country, looking for the supposedly subversive alien. After speaking to an eccentric scientist, Klaatu decided to deliver his message to the world's scientific leaders, who, conveniently enough, are having a summit in D.C. Fairly standard sci-fi fare, until you get to the speech itself. Klaatu says that humanity's violence and nuclear proliferation will threaten other species, and that they should stop using weapons of mass destruction before they wipe out an entire species, or else the aliens will use weapons of mass destruction to wipe out the entire human species. So, do as they say, not as they do? The film ends on this note. First, we must consider the socio-political context of the movie. World War II had ended in 1945, but in its wake only came more strife. The Soviet Union extended its sphere of influence through most of Eastern Europe, creating what Winston Churchill famously called the Iron Curtain. Shortly afterwards, the Soviet Union became the world's second country to develop a nuclear bomb, the first being the US. Paranoia about Soviet weapons and spies developed into the Second Red Scare, a witch hunt for supposed communist subversives in the United States. The first Red Scare had been a similar incident in the 1920s. One of the Second Red Scare's most frequent targets was the entertainment industry. In 1947, the House Un-American Activities Commission, or HUAC, blacklisted 10 Hollywood screenwriters. It didn't help that many people in the entertainment industry actually were communist, while others just resented the accusations. Naturally, they fought back through their art. The 1950s saw a slew of allegorical films, some playing off public fears of communism, and a few protesting the Red Scare and HUAC's activities. This brings us to The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's fairly obvious where the allegory is. Klaatu is being hunted by the government when he really just wants peace. Fair enough, but his final speech is what makes it interesting. The point he makes, when compared to the threatened punishment, is so blatantly hypocritical that it must be intentional. Sure, it can pass for an anti-war message, but that's not all that's at work here. Let's back up to something I mentioned earlier. Remember those nukes the Soviets were developing? Obviously, the US wasn't too happy about those. In fact, it resulted in an arms race on the principle of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, an appropriate acronym if ever there was one. Basically, the only thing preventing nuclear war was the fact that both countries would be completely destroyed. In other words, the United States didn't want the Soviet Union to use weapons of mass destruction to wipe out an entire country, or else we'd use our weapons of mass destruction to wipe out their entire country. Sound familiar? It should. Substitute countries with species, the Soviet Union with Earth, and the United States with the aliens, and you have Klaatu's demands. The film portrays Klaatu, the communist stand-in, as the dangerous subversive the government claimed he was, and goes on to, by implication, blame the Cold War on the Soviet Union. Doesn't seem like such standard sci-fi anymore, does it?